Well, folks, in today's video, we're going to be unboxing and trying to repair a very unusual steam locomotive I found on eBay. Inside this box is a Chessie System DaylightGS4 made by Bachmann Kadar in about 1978 or 1979. It's possible this specific one was sold under the Lionel brand name, but they're mechanically identical to Bachmann's of the time. And as all the first generation Bachmann locomotives go, this one has the famous cracked gear issue, so I'm not really sure if we're going to be able to get it running again, but I figure we'll give it a chance because I've always wanted one of these things, and to have a working model would be great. So let's see what we're dealing with here. And well, there is the locomotive. Let's get this thing all unwrapped here. Here's our classic tender. And then the GS4 itself, and well, as you can see, the wheels are already popping out of it. That is not looking good. You can tell that the gears are cracked right there. None of these things are hanging on anymore. But regardless of the condition of the wheels, we'll take it over to the track and try to test it out. It's definitely not going to run for obvious reasons, but we can at least find out if the motor's still good. I hope this thing is even capable of picking up power. Unfortunately, I've seen a lot of bad motors on these, I think because people try to force them to run once the wheels have started to bind up. If we give it some voltage. Yeah, it's definitely running in there. And got a working headlight. Oh, no way, it's even got a working smoke unit. Uh-oh. Gee, I hope that was the Flavor Country unit working and not the motor just giving up the ghost there. It didn't sound that bad, but that's sort of strange. Let's take it over to the bench and tear this thing apart. Now, if I remember correctly, there's only a handful of screws holding the whole thing together. I think there's one up front and possibly two in the back. Judging by how well these screws are torqued down, I'm thinking that I might be the first one to have opened this thing since it left the factory. Okay, so far things are not looking too bad. This is definitely an earlier model. I believe the later ones had a white casing around the motor. So I guess what we'll do now is just try to open up the motor and see what's going on inside there. I take back what I said about no one else having opened this thing before, because these screws always come coated in some sort of a resin, and if it's been removed, you know, somebody's opened it up before. That one seems to be completely stripped out. I mean, that definitely needs some cleaning, but far from the worst I've seen, that's for sure. And the springs look really good as well, which is a great sign, because if the springs are all compressed, that usually means that too many amps went through them and they got melted, so hopefully the coils in this are still in good shape. Let's give this a quick cleaning, see if we can get this motor running again, and then if we can do that, it might be worth trying to salvage the wheels and everything else. Let's see if that little repair did the trick. Well, the motor seems to be running. It doesn't sound great, but I think some of that could also be the gears just kind of sloshing around in there. So let's turn our focus to the wheels and everything else that's going on with this thing. Just that one little bit of damage taking down the whole operation here. I've already cited this video before, but in case you haven't seen it, Ron from Classic Model Trains came up with a really good solution for fixing the locomotives with these older nylon gears, and the premise is basically reinforcing everything with some brass parts. So I went on down to my local hobby shop and got some various pieces of pipe here, and we're just going to try to find one that's around the right size. And I mean, right off the bat, that already looks pretty darn close, so I think what I'm going to try to do now is see if we can kind of like shave this down maybe and then fit this around here. Now, I believe in Ron's video he manually sanded down the gears. I'm going to try something a little bit different. So after about 10 minutes of just kind of lathing away on this and doing a little bit of carving here and there with an X-Acto, finally got this to fit, and it's still nice and snug, so it will actually kind of clamp down on the plastic and hold on to this pretty well. With all the axle sleeves put together, I think we can start to re-quarter the wheels. Now this is where things get really complicated because on the newer ones these are square, so you just need to get it on the right side of the quarter. With these ones you actually have to adjust them. Now to quarter an HO scale locomotive, really the only thing you need to know is 3 o'clock. So if you think about the hands on an old analog clock, you've got your hour hand pointed at the 3 and your minute hand pointed at the 12. And so you want the top of each wheel on one side to be straight at 12 o'clock, and then on the other side at 3 o'clock, a quarter turn. Now, unfortunately, this all has to be done quite precisely, otherwise you get binding. And that went on nice and tight, which is exactly what I want to see. So now what I'll try to do is just get these all into place. So if that's at 12 o'clock, then we just need to set these at 3, so let's go back a little here. So we'll try to get this part on here and see if it runs. I don't think it's going to be perfectly quartered right off the bat, but let's keep messing around with it until it works. Hey, there we go. It's not perfect, but it's not binding too bad. There's just one spot, and I think it's maybe this one. So I've just been messing around with this thing, making little adjustments here and there, and at this point it seems to be running half decent, so I think we'll go through the whole drive now and add some oil, which should make it run even better, because right now everything is running dry, which is really not good, especially when you have an underpowered motor. I don't want to put too much, because I don't want this oil leaching into, you know, where we added all that glue and adhesive, so I want to put just enough to keep everything lubricated, not enough that it's going to kind of soak in. And then we'll just go through and give the running gear a little bit of oil. Definitely picking up some RPMs there, that's good to see. Yeah, it seems to be powering through. That's all good. Oh crap, look at that. Sheared right off. Well, I managed to get all that back together. Basically what I did was I found a piece of plastic which was the same diameter as the metal, because what they do when they put these things together is they mushroom the head, but over time the metal fatigues and then it just snaps off. So I just put the plastic through here, took a soldering iron, and then kind of mushroomed the head of the plastic on both sides just to hold it in place. It's not as strong as the metal, but at the same time too, plastic is a little more flexible, so I don't think it's going to fatigue as easily, and this is not a stress component like the bolts down here. But I think at this point we'll go ahead and just kind of tidy up the wheels a little bit, throw the shell back on it, and try to run the darn thing. The solder isn't even holding there anymore. So I think at this point we're getting pretty close to done. You can see that all the wheel sets are perfectly engaged, and moreover, the whole thing is turning over really well. I'm not seeing any signs of binding even at a really low speed, and the same goes in both directions right here. So I'm pretty happy with that. That's good enough for me right there. So we'll quickly take the drive over to the track. We'll just test it out on the actual rails to make sure everything is just as good as it seems on the bench here. And if it passes that test, I think we can go ahead and throw the shell back on it and just try running it around with some different cars. That actually seems pretty good. It's a real fast one. I haven't seen one go this quick before. Okay, well, I think it's safe to call that a pass. Well, that right there was a lot better than I was personally expecting. I did think that it would probably start because it ran fine on the bench, but yeah, I think it passed with flying colors. So let's get the shell on and really try running it around with an actual train behind it. I can't remember who said this years ago, but somebody in the comments told me one day that if you're having trouble getting a screw into place, it's always a good idea just to run it backwards until it falls into the hole, and then you can just tighten it down. And that little hack has really helped me over the years. Alright, that looks pretty good if you ask me. I think the only other thing I want to quickly do is throw a coupler on the tender, and we should be good to go. Perfect. And now for the most fun part. Let's see how this thing performs as a complete unit. Yeah! Just look at her go. Well, I think it's safe to say we've got a runner on our hands, so I'm going to go ahead and get the daylight cars out, and we'll put an actual train behind this thing. Well, so far the performance of this engine is just as good as I could have hoped for, and I've always wanted one of these things, so it really makes me happy to see one running around the layout. But the funny part of the story is shortly after I had purchased this non-working unit, a second one came up for sale, and it was listed as a quote-unquote strong runner, which is really rare for these first-generation Bachmann locomotives. So I actually ended up purchasing that locomotive as well, just in case I failed to fix this thing. Obviously, we know now that it seems to be a fine engine, but why don't we compare an original model to one of these older modified ones and just kind of see how they compare performance-wise. I've become quite a big believer in the expression, when it rains it pours, and this is really no exception to that rule, because I was looking for one of these daylights for months on eBay and I couldn't find one. And then I found the junky one, which we just fixed up, and then shortly thereafter this one comes up for sale, so I purchased it as well in case I failed to fix the other one. And then 3 more of them popped up for sale on eBay, and now since December I haven't seen another one up. And, well, there is the model. It looks to be in pretty good shape. And unlike the other one, the wheels do look pretty straight, so that's good to see. And there's the tender as well. It does sound like the weight is completely loose inside there, though. Let's see if the seller was being honest about the working condition of this locomotive. Oh, it is a runner. Look at that. Well, it's definitely in good working order, which is quite impressive for a first gen. I'm not sure if it's running any better than the one we just fixed up, but to be fair, I have no idea when this thing was last given any oil. So why don't we take it over to the repair bench, we'll check in on the axles and give it some new oil and see if it performs any better. I'm quite excited to see how this specific locomotive has held up to an issue that these first gens are so notorious for having. It's possible this could be a slightly later model, but I don't think Bachmann made a second gen chassis system unit. There's got to be something right with this one. Wow, they really torqued that down. If Thor ever had a screwdriver, it must have been used to tighten this bolt down. I really wish it didn't have to come to this. So it looks pretty much identical to the other one. We've got the exact same motor casing, although this one doesn't have a smoke unit, which is kind of interesting. Let's quickly open up this bottom part right here and see if we can add some oil there and check in on the gears. That's interesting. So they are slightly different. They've got these squares on them. But unfortunately, if you look very carefully, the same kind of damage is starting to occur right here. So I guess this one just hasn't had enough time for the axles to crack and cause the wheels to become unquartered, but it's probably inevitable that will happen. But at least we can go through here and just give everything a little bit of oil just to help reduce the stress on the motor. Okay, so I managed to back what was left of that screw out of the hole there, so we'll be able just to throw this back on. And then I found a replacement self-tapper, so it's going right back to factory specifications. Alright, let's go compare this thing to the other one. Yeah, there we go, that doesn't seem too bad. Crap. Well folks, that's going to be it for today's video. I hope you all enjoyed. I certainly had a lot of fun fixing this locomotive up, and I really couldn't be happier with the results. It actually turned out to be a pretty decent runner for a first gen. I do find it kind of funny though that the locomotive I bought as a junker is running, and the one I bought specifically because it was a runner has already broken down. But that will happen sometimes, so you really just need to go through it with the same process that was applied to this one, and things should be good to go. But until then, I just want to thank you all so much for watching.